Welcome, I'm Becky from the Seasonal Homestead. This video is all about the preserving that we've been doing from our garden over the past couple of months. And with having a baby this summer, I knew that preserving our harvest would need to be adjusted a little bit from years past. As a result, we have been doing less time-intensive preserving. Freeze drying is something that I've been doing a lot. It takes only a few minutes of prep, and then the rest of the preservation part is done by the machine. About 3 years ago, we planted our blueberry plants, and at this point, they are giving us a harvest, but it is so small compared to what we would eat in a year. Instead, we are picking a lot of blueberries from a local U-Pick. They have the best blueberries. They taste so much better than you could ever get at the store. We picked probably over 50 pounds this year. We froze a bunch, but I also wanted to try freeze drying some of our blueberries this year, especially because we picked so many. We needed to free up some of the freezer space. When we freeze dried the blueberries, we literally just poured them in the trays and we put them in our freezer and we pre-froze them before we put them in the freeze dryer. You can put in food at room temperature just as it is, or you can put in food that's already been frozen. I like to put in food that's already been frozen because I feel like it saves a lot of time and energy. I've heard from friends that they needed to poke holes in each of their blueberries before they put them in the freeze dryer in order for it to work properly and have it freeze dry all the way without it taking forever. I did not do that, and I still had really good results, and I'm not really sure how long it took because sometimes I just set it and forget it with the freeze dryer, but I think some of that has to do with the fact that we freeze them in advance and maybe that bursts the skins, or maybe it has to do with the variety that we picked. We pick Blue Crop and Chandler blueberries at our local U-Pick farm.
We just finished picking the majority of our peas. I have a bunch of snap peas, and I also have some of the shelling peas that the kids already shelled, so I'm going to weigh these and then we are going to blanch and freeze them, and some of them I will probably freeze dry.
I'm really trying to do a better job this year of weighing the harvests as they come in. I'm not very good at weighing salads and stuff like that because we never really harvest that in bulk, but for these peas, because I harvested them in bulk and I knew I was going to preserve them, I did take an account of how much came off of the plants. I am using my sister's garden planner for 2023. She has a page in there where you can just take harvest notes, and it's really cute, and it's been really good to motivate me to write it all down. Before freezing or freeze drying the peas, I do blanch them, and then I put them in a cold water bath to stop them from cooking. When I blanch them, it's usually about 2 or 3 minutes once that water comes to a simmer. Some people say to wait for it to boil. I never really do that. I just wait for it to come to a simmer, and then 2 minutes from there, and then it goes into the cold water bath. After that, I drain them really good, and the ones that I freeze, I put in bags or on trays, and I stick them in the freezer for about an hour to partially freeze before I package them. There are 2 reasons that I partially freeze the peas first. One is that my vacuum sealer, it will not seal very well if there is a lot of liquid there. And the other reason for that is if they're partially frozen, when you vacuum seal them and they all go together, they don't form this big clump. They will still kind of stay individual when you open up that package. After a full 24 hours of having our peas in our deep freezer, we put them in the freeze dryer to finish the job.
A couple of days ago, we harvested all of our garlic scapes. I have been trying to figure out what I want to do with these this year and how I want to preserve them. I've already made some garlic scape pesto, and hang on. So what I was thinking of doing for these instead of just the pesto is to chop them up and then freeze dry them and then make them into a powder that we can just add to any dish we want all throughout the year. So I feel like that will be more useful. I do like the garlic scape pesto, but we also make basil pesto, so we'll have plenty of that. I have never freeze dried garlic scape or actually dried them either, so I'm pretty sure it's going to make a nice powder to add to things like a spice and just give it that like a good mild garlic flavor. So I'm excited to try that out.
We finished chopping all of those garlic scapes and put them in bags in the freezer. I didn't get any video of that. But a couple days later, Cam and the kids harvested all of our green onions because it was getting so hot outside. We had to harvest them all at once. They chopped them all up, and they are amazing because that stuff was so strong. You can see Cam has goggles on. Then we put them in the freezer, and when I went to freeze dry everything, I just had it all already frozen, and I put them on the trays to freeze dry.
Close your eyes, hear the voice within, calling this heavy load got under your skin, howling. You got the white knuckles holding on it tight, keeping your feelings bottled up inside, heading for a collision in the night. To really live, you gotta die. Breathe in, breathe out. Hey, come alive. Breathe in, breathe out. Look at the colors, colors, colors. Right.
When we planted our peas this year, I decided to plant carrots next to them on a whim just to cover the ground to keep weeds from growing. And it ended up being a lot of carrots. You can see our harvest here. They're not my best looking carrots. They're kind of misshapen, a little bit smaller, but still good food nonetheless. So we rinsed them all off and took the green tops off. That's important if you're storing them, which is what we're doing here. Then dried them really good and put them in bags, and then I just store them in a refrigerator we have in the garage. We eat some of these carrots fresh, and the rest of them we will use in recipes as we are preserving throughout the summer. Celery is a crop that needs a lot of consistent watering. Where we live, we get a lot of good rain in the spring, but by the time we hit summer, we often have no rain at all. And ironically, I had set up irrigation all through my garden, but this is one row where I didn't have it set up. When the heat of summer hit, the celery started to not look as good, and we just harvested it all at once. Then we chopped it up to prep it for preserving.
I'm gonna try another 2 times. It worked!
We are starting to bring in a lot of vegetables from the garden, so that means it's time to get started on the preserving. I saw a soup that I wanted to make in my pressure canning book. In order to make that soup, I need to make some beef stock. I do not have any in my pantry currently, and we have a whole bunch of beef soup bones in the freezer, so it's a perfect thing to make because we need to make some freezer space and I need to prep for this canning recipe. So I'm using this book. This is the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving, and I really like this one because it's more of a simple recipe for the beef stock.
I only need like 2 or 3.
We harvested a bunch of celery the other day because it got super hot, so we chopped that all up and now it is ready to be blanched and frozen. I really like to freeze it because I use it in a lot of the canning recipes throughout the summer. If I had extra, maybe I would freeze dry some, but as of right now, I'm just gonna keep that in the freezer. Meat in there. We made really good progress yesterday. I got the beef broth all started. It's going right now still. I like to have it go for like 24 hours, so it's still on the stovetop cooking. And then I got the celery all diced, and then I got it blanched and frozen. So the other thing I was working on was I was making a recipe for stewed garlic butter zucchini, except I used summer squash because that's what I had. This comes from this book, Freeze Fresh. So I did a 10 times batch from this recipe. So I had 25 pounds of summer squash that I cooked down and made into this. So we're gonna put it into containers today because I let it chill overnight. So now it's nice and cool. It can go in some of those plastic containers that I got for it. And we'll put it in the freezer and label it.
When I started to put the stewed squash into containers, I had this idea that it would be good to add a little bit of color and a little bit of extra flavor and add some basil because we love basil.
You guys get me some basil. I want to put some basil in some of this.
My kids were nice enough to run out and grab that for me, and then I chopped it up really fine to add to these containers. For the first little bit, I was adding the squash to the containers and then sprinkling a little bit of the basil in and then mixing it together. And as I was doing that, I was like, what on earth am I doing? I just need to add this to the entire batch. So that is what I did. I finally wised up, added all the basil in there, kind of stirred it up and scooped it into the containers, and I filled the rest of them this way. Most of these I filled into the larger freezer containers. As I was standing there, Cam was saying to me it would be good if I could take a couple of those into work with me for lunches. So I grabbed a couple of the smaller containers so that he would be able to just take those for lunch one day and warm it up. When I finished the squash, I decided it was time to tackle the beef stock. It had been simmering for a very long time, and I needed to remove the solids and strain out all the little pieces, so I put it into mason jars. And then I got started on the canned soup recipe that I wanted to do. This is sausage and bean soup. Every year I make note of what are the things that I run out of quickly in the pantry, what's getting used the most, what does my family love, and I would say the number one thing, well, there's two things. two main things that we go through a lot of. One is freeze-dried fruit. We really love that. And the other thing that we go through super fast, and maybe even faster if I let my kids just have as much as they want, is the canned soups. We cook the majority of our foods from scratch, and that means anytime we want a snack or a meal, it takes quite a bit of preparation and time before we can eat anything. And while it's not necessarily a bad thing, it is nice to have some convenience foods available for a busy day or when we just don't feel like cooking. That's why having canned ready-to-eat meals or freeze-dried ready-to-eat meals is definitely high on my priority list for preserving this year. It's going to allow me to utilize all of the produce that I grew this year, preserve it for later, and also be able to cook these big batches. And when you're cooking in big batches, you can save a lot of time that way as well, and have that all ready to go as a healthier version of convenience foods for our family. So the recipe for this sausage and bean soup is coming from the book, The Complete Guide to Pressure Canning. This book also has our other favorite soup in it. It's actually not called soup. It's called Cajun black-eyed peas, but we call it Cajun cowpea soup. I started out by doing a double batch of the sausage and bean soup recipe, and then when I finished, it yielded a little bit less than the book said, and I had plenty of beef stock left over and plenty of ingredients that were still available, so I decided to go ahead and do another double batch. So I ended up with 24 quarts total. I was able to finish putting together the soup all in one day, but by the time it was ready to can, it was super late at night. And with our newborn, I am already really low on sleep, so I just decided to go ahead and put that in our cold room overnight and let that chill. And it actually ended up being a really good move because there was a lot of fat on the top of this soup. And you can can soups with a lot of fat, that's okay. It's just that if you have a large fat layer there, a lot of times when it is pressure canning, that can bubble up and get under your lid and then cause your lids to not seal properly. So I like to take some of that off, and I ended up taking a lot of it off because I just really don't love like a ton of fat in my soups anyway. So I took a bunch of that off. I did leave some there, and then I canned it after that. I also wanted to mention that I wait until the very last minute to add the kale to this recipe. This is different than what the book says. It has you add it a little bit before and cook it some, but I always add it at the end because I'm trying to save as much nutrition as possible, even though when you're pressure canning like this, it removes a lot of the vitamins that are there because it's cooked for so long. Another option that I've done before with the greens is to omit them entirely from the recipe, and then when I have them out in the garden fresh during the winter, because I try and have some greens there, I just go ahead and add either spinach or kale after we heat it up to the soup, and then we're able to have a lot more nutrition in there.